Hi, everybody. Dan Illman along with Ashley Mailloux, and we're going to take a look at race number 12 at Horseshoe, Indianapolis on Saturday. It's the Grade 3, $300,000 Indiana Derby. Let's take a look at this field of three-year-olds getting set to go a mile and a 16th. The beautifully bred number 5, Verifying, second in the Bluegrass before competing in the Kentucky Derby, coming into this race off a triple-digit Beyer performance when just nipped in the Matt win. Verifying has shown some ability in this race. It'll be interesting to see how low the fans make him at post time from an odds standpoint, because that Beyer speed figure stands out.
It certainly does, a 101. And, just looking at the performance in general, Disarm ends up winning it. Bo Cruz is behind him. I mean, looking at Disarm, I think Disarm, would have a huge shot in this race and probably be a favorite as well. So I think the caliber he's facing maybe a touch softer than what he's seen in his last several starts. And I will say his form's been a little bit muddied, but overall he's been a consistent type. And you wonder if he's just getting good at the right time. So I think he'll take a lot of respect in here. But a couple of others that are maybe intriguing, the 3, Act of Fool, who's got a win streak going. Most recently, the one on the turf, as well as Hayes Strike, who had a very impressive performance 2 starts back before finishing 3rd last time out in the Ohio Derby behind 2 fills.
Throwing up the Timeform US pace projector, one thing about Verifying that we do know is he likes to race close to the pace. I'm not sure about this Timeform US pace projector. I do believe Verifying is going to be up close, but you got to think a horse like the 3, Act of Fool, whose best game recently has been just shooting right out to the early lead. I think he's going to try to go, and maybe even the number 1 Transect, who went gate to wire at Horseshoe, Indianapolis last time out. I would think he's going to take advantage of the inside and go as well. There's a chance this pace heats up a bit.
I agree. I think looking at this race, I do think that the pace could be contested early on. I mean, I think these are the main 3 probably in terms of what they've shown so far in terms of showing speed. But even a horse such as Georgie W on the outside, I wonder if he'll kind of be in the mix or close to it early on. If it gets heated, then you wonder in terms of closers in here, who's got the best shot?
Well, Hayes Strike has the best late pace rating according to Timeform US. It's noted by the LP flag over his number 7 Chicklet. Let's start things off with Transect, going out for trainer Paulo Lobo. This is a well-bred son of Gunrunner who scored last time out, just going right to the lead at Horseshoe, Indianapolis. Now, his one flop came in the Gotham, where we watched the race at Horseshoe. He went to the front, he got a little bit of a breather on the back stretch, and he sprints right on home. He's won 3 of 4. You can give him an excuse for the loss in the Gotham. It was a wet track that day, and he might not have cared for it.
And just the Gotham in general, looking at this year, it was an interesting field, interesting result to say the least. So it was nice to see this horse hit the sidelines for a little bit and regroup and come back and get that win. Nice to see it was at Indiana, and just then also looking at his improvement. I mean, his numbers have drastically improved with that one start. Now just kind of wondering, can he take another step forward, second off the layoff? And as we discussed a couple of moments ago, Dan, he could be part of that pace scenario early on.
Speaking of the Gotham, we've got the Gotham winner in here. Raise Kane, the number 2, pulled off a 23-1 upset that day. He's winless in 3 starts since, and he's finished behind Verifying twice, including last time out in the Matt win over a sloppy track, which you think he might have liked. Have we seen the best of Raise Kane, or if he gets the right pace setup, does he have that puncher's chance from the back?
It's interesting to just look at his form. I haven't really been enamored with his last 2. I know in the Matt win, to me, he was kind of even in that race, 4 throughout, never really made a move. You look at 2 starts back. I'm always willing to forgive the Derby. We know it's a huge field. A lot can happen. And it's going a mile and a quarter. But typically his best races as of late, when you really look at the Gotham, was a 1-run sort of move where he was, towards the back of the pack early on, made a huge run to be a decisive winner in that race. I'm not sure what to make out of him. Obviously, they've also entered him at Prairie Meadows. It'll be curious to see what they actually opt for in terms of this race. But to me, he's kind of a mixed bag of apples in terms of his performances.
Act of Fool's only loss came over the synthetic surface at Turfway Park. He rebounded with 3 consecutive victories on dirt. Then he won a stakes race at Hawthorne on the turf. Let's go back to his most recent dirt start. This is 2 races back, a 3 life, not one is a 3 life at Hawthorne going 2 turns. And this is Act of Fool. He has big early speed. He utilizes it, and he shows this overmatched field as heels.
He certainly does. And I mean, I know his rider's kind of encouraging him now to go forward, but it's nothing drastic. And he continues to open up on the field. That it's the dirt race. He comes back to win the Hawthorne Derby in similar fashion, but going 9 furlongs on the turf. And I like that you pointed out at his debut, Dan. He didn't show anything at all. It's interesting to note that he did race with Lasix. He hasn't raced with Lasix in any of his starts since then. And he's been a win machine. So it's hard to say. Was it just that surface? Because now we see him as a turf winner as well. So maybe he just needed that race day experience on debut, but hard to knock his resume so far.
When analyzing the chances of the 4 on the stage who goes out for trainer Steve Asmussen, it'll be interesting to note whether he's a late developing 3-year-old that's slowly finding his stride, or is he a horse that's just taken advantage of some weaker fields in his last 2 races. His most recent start at Lone Star was a good-looking performance. Let's watch On the Stage. This is his first start out of the maiden ranks, a non-winners of 2 life, and he powers away from this group, and he got a pretty respectable Beyer speed figure as well. I have a feeling he's a late developing 3-year-old that's starting to get good.
I would agree. And just kind of looking at this performance, one thing that might suggest that, as you can kind of see, is a little, bobbing and weaving in the stretch. Nothing drastic, not that he's ducking out or ducking in, but you could see he's very responsive to his rider, still trying to figure it out. So maybe, that makes that case that it's taken him a little while to get going, but he's looked good in his last 2. He showed a really good improvement, as you mentioned, facing winners for the first time out. And maybe he just didn't like Oaklawn. You look at Oaklawn in terms of the track surface, it's different than Lone Star. The weather that they had all year was kind of ups and downs, with it just being the winter in Arkansas. You can get a lot of rain. So maybe it's a combination of things.
The morning line favorite in here, and likely favorite at post time, is the 5 Verifying, and there have been high hopes for this horse since day one. He's a Justify half brother to Midnight Bijou. He won the Travers Day maiden special weight for 2-year-olds in his career debut, and placed in the Champagne as a 2-year-old in his second lifetime start. Started off his 3-year-old season the right way. Nice first level allowance win, had some trouble in the Rebel, and then came back with this performance, his final prep before the Kentucky Derby in the Bluegrass, and he faced a very good 3-year-old in Tapit Trice. He got the jump on Tapit Trice. He tries very hard, and he's just going to succumb to the gray in the final 100 yards.
He ran his eyeballs out in this race, Dan. And I think looking at it, you hit the nail on the head. Tapit Trice is able to wear him down. And Tapit Trice is a horse that's been regarded as a horse that wants to go longer. He's a grinder. It takes him a while to get going. He's never in a hurry in terms of his races. And to see Verifying be closer to the pace throughout and to have such a big effort, I think bodes well for him. And then to see the Matt win in his most recent performance, a similar story. He's second best, but just misses by, a narrow margin. The question becomes, when I look at him in terms of his record, does he really like to win? He typically hangs, but you look at those races, they've been at 1 1/8, and with the distance of the Indiana Derby being 1 1/16 and him having that tactical early foot, I wonder if this is kind of the recipe where he finds himself in the winner's circle. I think he needs to go a tad shorter than he has, and maybe in the future we'll see him cut back even more, just knowing that he has that early foot.
The number 6, Stay in Your Lane, is not living up to his name. He is not staying in his lane. He's jumping out of the maiden ranks, where he is still a maiden after 4 starts. He's stretching all the way out in distance, and he's leaping up into the graded stakes ranks. On paper, he's tough to like.
I think you summed it up, Dan. I don't know if I have much to add on Stay in Your Lane. They've tried different things with him. He's been at different levels, but nothing that he's shown so far really would make a case for him. His best performance was that second place finish at Churchill back in April. But since then, lackluster performances, has either been towards the back of the pack and trailering throughout, or more recently just hasn't had any sort of punch or indication that he, wants to go even further than he's been going so far.
The 7, Hayes Strike, is probably the best closer in this race, and he was up against it last time out against the very, very good 2 fills in the Ohio Derby. Let's show off that stretch kick from 2 starts back. This is at Lone Star Park in the Texas Derby, and it's fair to say he's got a lot of work to do when they turn for home, and he somehow, some way gets up in the shadow of the wire.
Yeah, you're trying to find him in this race, and now there you can see he's circled post 7 for him. He was towards the inside. Now he's going to try to angle out here, and there's still plenty of work to do at this point. But looking at his style, even Kenny McPeak has said he's a 1-run, 1 sort of move horse, and when he can roll, we'll see it here. He really picks it up. And I just love the way he crosses the wire in front in here. He's got great expression as a horse that, might even want to go longer in his career, but it bodes well. That was at a mile and a 16th. And as you hit kind of the nail on the head also with the Ohio Derby, looking at the top two on paper, they were the top two. And in terms of the trips that they got, very different than his running style.
The 8 is Cagliostro, and this horse has raced in graded stakes competition once before. And I think it's fair to draw a line to the Louisiana Derby because he acted up pretty badly behind the gate. He actually broke through the gate, and sometimes that just takes a lot out of a horse. I like that Cherie DeVos, a very underrated trainer, gave this horse plenty of time after that race, returned in a first-level allowance, and this horse did quite well at a one-turn mile. I'm looking forward to seeing him get back out around 2 turns.
I am too. And I think, you mentioned Louisiana Derby. I think he's a horse that, if I'm not mistaken, I think he's got a little bit of a personality, and sometimes that gets the best of these horses on race day, but he has raced well since that bit of a freshening. I thought he looked really good at Churchill going a mile in a race where it did shape up for him. The pace was contested enough that he had that late run, only missed by a head behind Scotland, who's a horse that has some love and respect behind him. So I'm curious to see him move forward once again. If you kind of disregard the Louisiana Derby and you look at that field, maybe you make a case with Disarm, stepping up in the Matt Win, and maybe you look against kind of Kingsbarns and what he's been able to do since then. I think draw a line through that, draw a line through the debut, and he's an interesting horse, especially if the pace is hot.
8-1 on the morning line for Cagliostro. Georgie W. completes the field. He's done nothing wrong, 2 for 2. Earned a nice Spire speed figure over this course last time out in a race that was washed off of the turf. I wonder if this is a case of too much too soon. He'll have to overcome the wide post.
He's going to have to, get over that post. We've talked about he does have a little bit of early foot, but you have to remember last time out, it was only a 4-horse field. It was a race that was carted for the turf. When they get kind of washed off to the main track, I think you have to be really careful how deep you dive into that, especially the margin of victory and the buyer in general. I'm not sure what he faced. He was much the best, and as impressive as that may be, I'd be a lot more impressed if it was a big field that was originally carted for the main track. So he will need to step forward, but Will Walden has done a very good job since he's launched his training career, and I think they're probably excited to have this horse in this race, but he'll need to improve.
Top pick time for the Indiana Derby. I'm ashamed to say I chalked out with Verifying. I like the point you made about him. I like him going shorter distances. I think a mile and an 1/8 is too far. A mile and a 16th might eventually be too far for him down the road as well. I'm curious to see him as sort of a 7/8 one-turn mile horse. But I think in this race, he's going to be up close and get the jump on the closers. But I love that you're going for a price. I liked Cagliostro's last race, and I'm worried that I might have overlooked him a bit.
I don't know. I mean, I went back and forth here, and I just honestly didn't want to take chalk. And I started thinking about the pace scenario. And if it is heated, I wonder what happens. Looking at some of the fractions that were set at Keeneland and Ellis Park for Verifying, I wonder what happens if they go a tad quicker. I know he's also cutting back just a little bit. So that was kind of my concern. I thought with the price difference, I would go with the 8. I've been very impressed with him. Curious to see how he'll now race second off the layoff, but he's going to need pace. This is a horse that he's not going to be in the first 2 or 3 early on. He's going to come from off of it. So when I see, if Verifying sets an easy half in here, I'll be in trouble, but I'm going to use him in here. I think he's a horse at least worth using in the exotics.
8, 5, 3, and 7 for Ashley. I'm going to go with the 5, Verifying in here. I'll use him over the 2, Raise Cane, who might be able to get the right setup from the back of the pack at a price. It's the Indiana Derby at Horseshoe Indianapolis on Saturday. Best of luck.